theater makers, and welcome back to Theater's Not Dead with Keyanna Alexander. I am your host, Keyanna Alexander. We are continuing today with Next Gen, where we're talking to people who are early in their careers and navigating into this industry and making predictions about where they think we're heading and what changes need to be made. I'm so excited to have two very special guests on the show today. I met them through Women's Theater Festival, and I just think they are quite literally the bee's knees. So let's talk about who they are. Sophia is a interdisciplinary theater artist, administrator, and writer whose work aims to recenter narratives and voices left out of the mainstream canon. As a certified survivor advocate, their theatrical work is especially focused on reframing the practice of depicting sexual violence on stage and encouraging and engaging in the practice of informed consent in all aspects of rehearsal and performance process. Cassandra is a junior at Oberlin College, where she is a theater and creative writing double major. Oh, yikes, friend. She is an experienced stage manager, lighting technician, and after her tenure with WTF, a streaming technician who looks forward to returning to her work at Oberlin in the spring. Okay, so that's just a little bit about them, but we're going to get so much more into it. Now here they are. Hi, hello, good morning.
Morning.
I think I'm overcompensating for the fact that I have no caffeine in my system by being overly gestury today. A little bit about me that no one asked for. How are you two doing?
I'm pretty good. I am sitting with my cat, and his full name is Victor Hugo, which I think is very important and revealing of his personality.
That says literally all we need to know.
Mhm.
I'm doing well. I got up, I ate some Christmas cookies, and I am so excited to be on the show today.
Did you just have Christmas cookies for breakfast?
Yes, it is 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast, and I did not want to make noise in the kitchen and wake up my siblings. Um, so I went for the easy grab, which were peanut butter kiss cookies.
Oh, that's the
I
best.
I would say that's the most adult thing you could ever possibly do.
I think it was a really mature decision on my part.
Absolutely. Yeah, I support you in every layer of that process. So we always start off our show with asking people a very important question, and I can't wait to hear your answers. How did you get started in this thing called theater?
I I was a ballerina before I did theater. I did ballet from the time I was 4. And when I was in 3rd grade was like, I really love those stories. And started going to this camp that they do in my town called the Children's Educational Theater. It's a summer camp. Um, and really was deep into acting for a long time and continued that, not the camp but the acting, all the way up through high school. And partway through high school I got hired as an auditorium technician in my school's theater, um, and ended up kind of making a sideways jump into stage management, and then went to college and stayed in stage management. And yeah, I've been doing it for a long time now, but stage management has not always been what I did. So
I first off was muted, so hello friends. Second, Cass, I can't imagine a high school stage manager. As a college stage manager, I was a tyrant. Like,
Mm.
I was the worst. So I can't imagine what a high school stage manager must have been like.
like to think I did a good job. I like to think I was not a tyrant. I was not overly demanding. In my high school, the position was split between an assistant director and a stage manager. So the stage manager didn't do the whole rehearsal process. But I've really come to love that part of the process. So I wish that I'd had more time to practice that before I got to college. But the stage manager really came in Tech Week and was like, okay, now I'm in charge. So it was a little bit different than the way that we think about stage management.
Oh, okay, we're good. There were safety nets in place. Okay, we're fine. Sophia, theater, why and how?
Yeah, I don't think that I knew theater existed until I was in 6th grade. I can't remember ever thinking about it at all until 6th grade, and then only because the person I had a crush on was cast in the ensemble of the musical. So at that point, when I realized that, I had missed the auditions. I couldn't get in that way. So the only way in was to do the stage crew. So I built the set for Annie the musical, and I ran the light board, and then the light board caught fire. And then I was like, oh, I never want to do that again. But I actually kept doing it, which is crazy. So I've been doing like backstage technical work since I was in middle school, and I went to college wanting to be a stage manager. And I was a stage manager for my first 2 years, and then I met an incredible woman named Eleni Papaleonardos, who taught me that like directing isn't a tyrant, like lording over everybody and telling everybody what they have to be doing all the time. It can be like a collaborative process, which was the first time I'd experienced something like that. And then I was like, oh, I actually want to be doing that. That's the part that I like. So I switched to directing when I was a second semester sophomore in college, and I've kind of stuck with it ever since. I really dig it. And I think I also I'm not good enough at schedules to be an effective stage manager. So I'm happy to have lost the spreadsheet part of the theater making.
I love the spreadsheet part of the theater making.
I'm so glad someone does.
I'm going to backtrack just a wee bit here. There was a fire in your light board?
Yeah. When I was in middle school, the year before I went to 6th grade, they tore down the middle school in my neighborhood to completely rebuild it. So we were in like a World War II holding school. Like it was very old. It had not been updated recently. Everything was terrible. And that was the first year that we were in the holding school. So we did the musical, and no one had thought to check, like, do the instruments actually work? Can we use them? Until the day of the like in school like assembly performance that you would do. And we were all getting ready, and then the light board caught fire, and we had to evacuate the school, and we never did get to show the school Annie the musical.
Oh no.
Wow. Wow. But that's a great lesson for all of us here at TND to check the equipment.
Yeah.
It's funny now because no one was hurt, but like also. Oh, that's so bad. That's just so bad.
Yeah.
Well, I'm currently scrolling through some of the questions that I had for y'all, trying to figure out where to go to next. But in all honesty, I just want to keep talking about things that get set on fire.
I have one.
Cass, go.
In my high school, we had this big stage because the orchestra pit. Oh, my camera just shook. Sorry, friends. The orchestra pit had been built over to be able to put in like a ventilation system. So we had this huge apron on the front of the stage, which meant that the electrics didn't like come all the way forward. So we had to light from heaven to be able to hit anybody on the front 10 feet of the stage. And so imagine me, I'm whatever, 16, 17, up in the booth testing lights, and someone has flown in the electric. But it's really far away because I'm all the way in the back. And so I can't really see what's going on until someone goes, Cass, the stage is smoking. and our lights were so old and so hot that one of the electrics just flown in a little bit too low caused a very, very small fire on the stage. And it was put out. It was fine. We didn't have to evacuate. It was okay. But yeah, really, really old source fours are not necessarily what you want to have in your high school theater.
No. I feel like there's been so many stories about source fours starting fires, but mainly because people can't afford LEDs for their theaters. But I don't know. Source fours are my first love. That was the first light I learned how to run an electric through. Like,
I mean,
I love
it's
them.
the best. It's the standard, but they get hot. And you just got to know that they get hot.
They get hot, they burn through gels, they start fires. Like, it's a thing. Everybody, it's okay. It's okay. So mine does not involve actual fire, but where there's smoke, you can assume there is fire. We're doing a classical piece, so I am in full like hoop skirt costume. I had the ringlet, wig, the whole bit. I am very flammable is the moral of the story. And we're getting into this really intense scene where my scene partner is the villain of the show, and it is assumed, going back to Sophia's work, it is assumed that this man is about to like sexually attack me. So like it's this really intense scene where we're going back and forth, and I'm trying to like distract him and all this other stuff. And in the next scene after us, so like I get attacked, and then in the next scene, this ghost shows up. It's a wild show. And so there's this whole smoke machine thing that's currently getting prepped behind us, behind the curtain, as we're going back and forth. So talking, getting closer, I back away, cat and mouse, all around the stage, crazy blocking. The smoke machine triggered the fire alarm in the middle of the scene. And so there's this moment where I look at my scene partner and he looks at me, and we're just like, we can't continue, right? It's confirmed that we now have to get off stage. And I look into the wings, and there's this poor freshman ASM who has no clue what the fuck is going on. And she's kind of just like, just come here. I don't know what's happening. Just come here. So we're like, okay, all right. We're just gonna, ever so politely, our director comes out on stage and is like, we're now gonna ask everyone to calmly exit the theater. There is a small, well, he doesn't even say like fire. He's just like, we're now going to ask everyone to please exit while the firefighters come to inspect the theater. So now all of us in full costume are just hanging out outside with the cast, with the audience. Like, one of the guards is like smoking a cigarette with some guys who are like just randomly there on the street. It was a whole thing. And then we had to go back inside and pick up where we had left off.
Oh.
So like our scene's just shot. It's just shot in the face, dead in a ditch. We're kind of just like, all right, let's just go through the motions. Let's just get this over with, because there's no way. So I'm thankful it was not a real fire. Did it ruin that performance for the night? One could say yes. All right. Okay, this time for real, we have to get on topic. So we've talked about directing and we've talked about stage management. How has adapting this creative process and this very like disciplined and spreadsheet based practice, how's that shifted and changed due to going virtual?
It's a whole different position, really. It's a lot of the skills are the same. There are still spreadsheets, there's still organizing to do. You still need a production manager. But the actual role of a stage manager, what the stage manager does, is very different. The at least with the Women's Theater Festival, the stage manager is now called a streamer. And they're not calling cues, they're running the show through OBS. And they know the cues, they've designed the cues because they're also the designer. And so it's not just that you have to facilitate the design with the costumes and the set and the lighting, but that you have to create the design and then you have to run the design. It's a very different position. And you're not with the process as long, at least with a big festival like Occupy the Stage. You're not kind of in the room from auditions through strike. You're really just there at the end to be like, hi, I'm running your show today. And so your relationship with the show is very different. Your relationship with the cast is very different.
Yeah, I would say kind of a similar thing happened to like my directing practice, in that it was kind of cut in the middle. Because I think now virtually, as much as we want to say that like the physicality of theater can still be achieved by like moving around more, you can't, because people just simply aren't in the same space with each other anymore. But I think it's provided a lot more time to focus on the table work part of the process, which I think is something that's always sacrificed in a lot of like physical theater or real world theater performances. I think table work tends to get cut short in order to focus on the physicality. So I think being able to extend the table work and really dig into the characters and like the way that the words function the play has been really valuable, and is something that virtual theater has allowed for that to come back into focus. But I think, really miss being able to play around with the ways that people's body in spaces create different feelings, because that's something that's just gone.
Do you think that there's a way to achieve a connection with cast and crew using virtual, even if it's not the same as it would be in person?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Yeah, I would agree. Because I think even if, like, thinking of Occupy, the streaming tech didn't come in until, day of, theoretically, or you could have a meeting with the cast and the streamer in advance. But I know that, like, I personally was meeting with my streamer a bunch, just being like, what is possible technically? So even if I think they don't get as much opportunity with the cast, I think in terms of like the creative aspect of being part of that decision-making process is still possible. And I think when I was stage managing, that was super valuable to me, to see how the sausage was made.
I have been a huge advocate for my whole life of like directors need to know a little bit of everything so that they can anticipate what their designers need from them and have realistic expectations of what they're asking people to do. I've been on that soapbox my entire career, and virtual theater, in the same vein, needs everyone to have at least a small amount of understanding so that we can properly communicate. Hi, Cass. Have you had to like coach people as a streamer about what it is you actually do and what resources you need to do your job?
Yes. And part of that was that I was really in the learning process while I was with the Women's Theater Festival. So I was both learning what I needed and learning how to stream, and then needing to be able to turn back around and say, and this is what I need from you to be able to do my job. But it's very different, and people expect, people have different expectations because they're used to being in a live space with all of the lights and with all of the sounds. And so to be able to make that transition, I think, is really difficult for people, especially if you're a director with a really big vision or an actor who's used to being in the physical space, that to explain, like, yes, I understand that you want this transition to happen because you want this scene to look like this and this scene to look like this. But to make that happen, it's twice as much work. And it's not just changing the lights on the light board the way that it is when you're in person, when you're in a physical space. Like, you have to design every cue one at a time. And not that you don't design every cue one at a time when you're programming a light board, but the process is very different and the workload is very different. And so having to be able to explain that, it's complicated. It's different for everybody.
Case in point, so Theater's Not Dead operates through OBS, which is the software that we are all trained on. And even for so there are ending slides, there is our conversation, there is my intro, and there is the starting soon, and there is the animation. So that's 7 scenes. To build this OBS file that we are currently existing in on the Internet of Things, between colors and formatting and animation and transitions, took me about 3 hours to build. Like, not all in one sit down because your girl gets distracted, but I would say collectively it took me about 3 hours to get all of this just right and to look presentable on the internet. Right. So for cast doing a whole show, I don't know, I would say be careful of how many cues you're asking of people.
And you're alone, which is different too. Like, there might be a costume designer working with people. There might be someone helping them get the lights in order, depending on how elaborate your show is. But you alone are responsible for what the show ultimately looks like when it's up in the world. And that reality is very different than being the person who's facilitating everything.
Whew, yes. So once the show goes up, very traditional, where like, oh, the show's up, it's the stage manager's show. Same thing happens virtually, right? Where, oh, as a director, it is out of my hands. Go forth, streaming technician, and prosper. Sophia, can you talk a little bit about where does your process stop and how does that transition of power go for you?
Yeah. I love collaborating, not a joke. So I love being able to be like, it's no longer like me personally, it's everybody's, or now it's Cass's. Everybody listen to her. So for me, it's always been kind of super easy to just be like, I know what a stage manager does. I know it's super hard to be a stage manager. And I know, like, now that it's like tech week, even, give it to the stage manager. Stage manager is going to call everything. Stage manager gets to say when we're done or when we're, starting. And virtually, I think there isn't that like extended tech period anymore where like everybody's there all day for 7 days, like building the show for like a final look. I think for me and all the virtual work that I've done, it's been like, we have a day that is the tech day.
An hour.
Yeah. So I think that's knowing that is super condensed virtually just by the nature of, people get Zoom fatigue. We're all working in limited and like personal spaces, like knowing that the tech has been condensed. I really value in advance telling the cast that like, as soon as we're with the streaming technician, like, you need to listen to them first and foremost. It's no longer about me. It's no longer about you. It's about the streaming technician. And I think being able to value that the work that the streaming technician does is not something that I could ever do as someone who's like adamantly anti-learning anything about computers. I don't think I could ever do the stuff that I've seen Cass do. So I think it's so important as a director to be able to say like, it's up to them now. It's not about what I want anymore. It's about what they can achieve.
I will say this until the cows come home. Keyanna can't sound design, right? Like, as a director, you should know what lanes you can swerve into and what lanes you need to stay out of, okay? And thanks so much to streamers like Cass who, like, just politely will step into your Zoom call and be like, hello, you're doing everything wrong, but it's okay. I can fix it. Thank you. Both of you participated in a little event called Occupy the Stage for Women's Theater Festival this previous November. I'm saying previous November, like that wasn't literally last month. It's just 2020 time is not linear, so everything doesn't feel proportionate anymore. Could either of you, both of you, share your experiences with Occupy the Stage and how that event worked in whatever capacity you were participating in?
I can go first because I think I had a smaller workload than Cass did, just in terms of projects that I had my little hands in. So I directed a show for Occupy, and it was awesome. Loved that. I assistant directed a show for Occupy. So much fun. And then as an apprentice with Women's Theater Festival, I helped to run the captions and like write a couple captions for all the shows. All the shows were live captioned. So we had to, in advance of that, type up all the scripts into captioning programming, which was, so time consuming. So I did that. And then I also helped to design the programs specifically. If you looked at the program for Occupy, there was a little table of symbols that we put throughout the program that said what all the plays were about. And that was Cass, me, and another apprentice named Elle spent, I think we were on a Zoom call for like 3 hours going like, what symbol could mean a play about family?
That was a long call, and then it was a lot of hours of work to assemble it after that.
Yeah. But it was like, I think that was one of the most valuable parts of Occupy was that we had that like key within the code to be or within the program to be able to say like, this is, you can easily identify what every play was about. And I think that made it a lot more accessible for people.
Yeah, I would agree. I started my work with Occupy way back during the Reader's Tree. I was on branch 2 of reading plays for selection. I don't know off the top of my head how many plays I read, but it was not an insignificant number. And so that process was you read a play that had been read by branch 1 and approved at the first level. And then there was like a rubric and you filled out the rubric about the play. And then ultimately Johanna, I'm not going to try to say her title because I'm blanking on it right now, but ultimately Johanna, who's in charge, made the final calls.
Executive Artistic Director?
Executive Artistic Director.
That sounds right.
I think that's correct.
This is what happens when your company isn't like very title focused, we're more like task focused. Cass, continue.
So I started there. I then had a really intensive like learn to stream process with Mickey and Pim and the other streaming apprentice, Olivia. And while that was happening and I was learning all of these new skills, I was also doing a lot on the production management side. So that was creating the master spreadsheet that had all of the information for all of the plays, for all of the people who were in all of the plays or involved with all of the plays and their contact information and their role.
That was you?
Ways. That was me. That was a very, very big task. Other similar organization things, working with the directors and the tech checks, working on the program, working to send some emails back and forth with actors, gathering contact information and conflict information so that we could schedule the plays, negotiating schedule changes so that we had a schedule where all of the actors could attend the show that they had been cast in. Yeah, so I did a lot of production management work, and I also learned how to stream and streamed 4 shows.
This also reminds me, and I would love to hear either of you people to talk about this, is every task takes longer now. Whereas we could have been in a room together and Sophia could just ask a very simple, okay, what does Wednesday look like for everyone? And then you just kind of chime in, and then right there within the next 3 minutes, you have a definitive Wednesday time to meet. Now that's a doodle, a email, a text message chain. Like every task now takes 3 times as long. At least in my experience, are you two feeling the same way?
Absolutely. As as a director trying to like schedule rehearsal processes, it's now like a 2-tier Google like poll where it's like, what days are you free? And then what times on those days are you free? Before I can even say like, what if this day? It's so much longer now in a way that like I didn't anticipate, because I think to make any sort of decision, it also has to be, a series of emails or a 3-hour Zoom or anything like that, where it could have just been 15 minutes in a room.
And it's not even just about how much time it takes to plan things or how much time it takes to be on Zoom and the way the conversations are different on Zoom, though that's all part of it. It's also that it's really uncharted territory. So figuring out not just how to make a spreadsheet, which is something that any one of us could do, but what actually needs to be on that spreadsheet and how it would be most functional for this really ridiculous virtual world that we're all put in. That hasn't been done. There's no template for how to make this function. And so there's this whole process of figuring out what's needed before you can even get to the making of the thing.
Oh, oh, you hit the nail on the head with that one, Cass. Using TND as the example yet again, yikes. We had a artist agreement, and then we realized about halfway through that the form we were having people fill out did not contain all the information we needed from them. And it's like, oh, so do we backtrack and get that information from previous guests, or do we just roll with it with the new guests? Like, going back to Cass' point, we're all learning, and you don't realize you need something until it's staring you in the face. Very scary, this virtual thing we're doing here. Which brings us to our next question. I shouldn't have sung that, and I'm so sorry. What is the future of theater, and is virtual theater a part of it?
I hope so. I I think it's hard to say what the future of theater is. I think Broadway will reopen someday. I think that regional theaters will keep doing what they're doing and find more ways to reach their audiences, and that someday we will all be back in person in physical space making things together. Um, but I think that virtual theater has a lot of potential for accessibility. The work that we do with captionings, I think there are ways to make that part of live theater and make that accessible. The work that we do um, streaming to reach a wider audience, I think could be really important in a lot of ways moving forward. I don't think we'll ever have ever I don't think we'll ever say yeah, let's just do virtual theater from now on. That's fine. Because that's not what any of us really want in our hearts, I don't think. But I do think that there are elements that can be incorporated as we go forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. The whole time you were talking, I was like very brave to think that Broadway will reopen someday. But
someday. I'm not saying in 2020 whatever when they're saying. I'm saying someday.
Soon, maybe, but not in the future. I don't know. But I agree with that, the idea that there's new aspects of the process that have come up through virtual theater that I hope stick with it. Like I talked about earlier, I think there's a lot more value placed on like the text itself now, that we're able to spend more time with the words before we're like, what's a way to make a full ballroom dance scene? Like that's not possible anymore. So we don't have to up time in the process. We have a lot more time to sit down with the words, which I hope that's something that continues on once people are back in places. But I agree that accessibility is like such a core function of virtual theater, or even just in being able to like connect virtually. Like 80% of the TikToks I see a day are captioned, which is like painstaking to do on TikTok. But like accessibility has come to the forefront of the ways that we communicate virtually. And I think placing value on that and like insisting on that to be part of theater practices moving forward, even once we're back into theaters, is something that I think could revolutionize the practice and could make it 100% better for everyone involved.
Last week, we had Chelsea Russell on the show, who made an excellent point specifically about captioning, where she said captioning live performance is already a thing. It just took us staring at computer screens to realize we should be captioning everything. And I think there's going to be so many more instances of this where we realize, oh, well, virtual theater taught us that we should be more inclusive. So how do we apply that to live in-person performances? Sophia, you made a remark about Broadway not reopening. And I'm going to throw out an assumption, and then you let me know if I am wrong. Are we hesitant about rejoicing for the Broadway reopen because we know a lot of the institutional toxicity that's in Broadway has not been fixed?
Yeah, I would say that's 100% right. I think there's a lot of institutional toxicity around it. I think there's a lot of value placed on like what will draw people in rather than like what makes good art. So I think like it's a valuable part of the New York economy, and it's like a valuable part of theater as a whole, but I don't think that it is in a good place. I don't think it because it holds such a high standard where it's like Broadway is the thing. When I started doing theater in high school, my mom was like, your dream is to be on Broadway. And I was like, I don't think it is. That's the thing that everyone knows when you say you do theater, and to know that it is so harmful to the people involved, but then also like there isn't a great value placed on like the art itself. It's really difficult to be like excited at the idea that one day it'll reopen.
It is a fascinating dichotomy because I've experienced this as well, where non-theater practitioners do hold Broadway as like the holy grail, as the thing that you are aspiring to be if you are an artist, whereas you have academic theater makers, or I'll say it, more elitists, who think that Broadway is for the layman and is not real art, is too commercialized to be considered art. And I have mixed feelings about it, so it's so interesting to hear different opinions about the Broadway. Uh, I, yes, but what stands out to me when Cass was speaking was we are still holding them as the guinea pig for other theater openings. So when Cass was like, I think Broadway's going to open back again, do am I crazy? Or like in the Marchish, April, Mayish, everyone was looking at Broadway and was determining we can open our regional theater when Broadway opens. Was that not a thing?
Maybe, but I think that more and more regional theaters, community theaters are actually finding the space to open without Broadway because they're smaller. They can afford to operate below capacity. The way that they function and are structured is very different. And so I think Broadway is held up as a symbol of theater in the country, but that more and more people are figuring out how to function independently from Broadway and the example that they set, and that it might change the tone moving forward. I don't think Broadway is going away, but I think that the relationship between Broadway and regional theaters might change.
Yeah, I think in March there was the whole idea that like Broadway is closed, everything's closed. But I've definitely seen theaters around me find ways to function and present shows in a way that Broadway hasn't been able to.
And part of that is because I think so much of Broadway is about like the showbiz and the razzle dazzle. Um, and that doesn't you can't do that on screen.
I don't know, Cass. I have some mean ass jazz fingers. It it might be a thing. Also, can the whole show just be me doing jazz fingers? That's the real question here. Um,
I think Sophia as a director would have some qualms about that.
It would be a fun choice. Would it be the right choice? Who's to say?
our in my house, the new critique we have for works is a decision was made. I can't say I agree with that decision. I can't say I approve of that decision. A decision was made.
It sure was a decision.
And now I think every time I'm in a piece, I'm going to consider would Sophia consider this a decision? And then would Sophia agree with this decision? We can't I'll never know. That's always going to be in the back of my mind from now on. So thank you for the future anxiety. I appreciate that so much. I do. Okay. So going back to this concept of the future of theater and what changes are currently being undertaken, what is one or two or 8 things that you really want to see reshaped in our industry? Or burned down. We talked about burning stuff down a couple of weeks ago as well.
I can start if Cass is thinking.
I'm thinking.
Okay. I think there's a really toxic model in place in a lot of like the American theater and the way it was taught, that there's like a generation above us who learned that the director is the boss, is the tyrant, has the final say, can put people wherever like they want in the space, regardless of how those people feel, can demand anything of performers, regardless of like the personal impact on the performers. And I think that that needs to be completely done away with. I think the only way to continue to evolve theater is to make it collaborative, because I think everyone is bringing different skills and values into a space. And if we don't hear everyone out and like hear what they want to make or what they know about making theater, it's just going to continue to be the Crucible forever. Like, we're just going to see the Crucible everywhere forever. And I'm so tired of it. So I think if we like find a way to like across the board get rid of that idea of like the director as like, I don't want to say like as the patriarch, but as like the person at the top and everyone underneath them like bows to that will.
Like the sole decision maker.
Yeah. I think if we can completely get away with that, like there's going to be so much new life breathed into like the American theater. That's what I want.
I think a lot about not just accessibility, which we've already touched on a bit, but openness and acceptance of the theater makers, and of the theater that we're making. So like what stories we're telling, why we're telling them, why they're important in this moment in time in the world, and making sure that those stories are diverse and representative of the people that we are. And then making sure that the people telling those stories, the people on stage and behind the scenes, are also diverse and representative of the people that we are. I think that work is already being done in a lot of places, but the way that I have experienced walking into a room as a stage manager and having to fight for acceptance and authority in a way that my male counterparts do not is really difficult. That I'm not, by virtue of my position, accepted as the person in charge of the rehearsal is really difficult. That I can have a man as my ASM and people will listen to him when he talks and not to me when I talk, it's really difficult. And so I think until we address those things in our rehearsal rooms, it's hard to address them on stage.
That shift of focusing on the process and not on the performance is definitely one of the practices I want more people to use in these coming of, I don't know where that sentence was going, so I'm just going to stop it, is what's happening here. But yeah, that's one of the things I want to see change, because when you have a better process, the product will be better by default, right? If you're putting better ingredients into your pizza, that's going to be a better pizza. Am I stealing the slogan from Papa John's? Okay, this got very off topic. So that's definitely one of the things that I too want to see, and I think both of you are touching on that, right? This idea of so many people are trying to fix the problems in our industry by doing different types of productions, by like having that one, oh look, we have colored productions, oh look, we have non-binary productions. No, you need these people in your staff, in your production team, in your rehearsal process. Every time we are restructuring the rehearsal process every time, so that every show doesn't have to worry about being inclusive. It innately is. Because you now, as an institution, have changed who is involved in the collaboration process, instead of having some man tell a bunch of women on stage, look how groundbreaking the show is, look at all these women, and then they're all still saying yes to a man during the rehearsal room.
It has to be both and. It can't be one and it can't be the other. It has to be all of the pieces.
Yes. I could not nod hard enough, Cass. Okay, we are winding down, so I'm going to open the floor to the both of you. Where can people find you on the Internet of Things, and what projects are you currently working on?
I think I'm going to be less exciting, so I'll go first. I am currently working on going back to school to finish my degrees. I have not actually left, it's just that I've been away for the pandemic, so I'm not jumping back into any shows or productions right away. But you can find me on Instagram at CassJSGJ, if you want to follow me.
Cass and I, right before we went live, discovered that we both went to or are going to school in Ohio, and that was very exciting. I have so many thoughts about Ohio. I am also on Instagram at AKA_Sophia. Could be a dash, could be an underscore. I think it's an underscore. And coming up, I am virtually ASMing Ada and the Engine for Silver Spring Stage in Maryland. Very excited about that. I am virtually directing Captain Joe as part of Brave New Classics, Brave New Voices, A Little Radical, Alice Gerstenberg Festival. Very excited about that. And yeah, that's what I have coming up.
I should have asked this like at the beginning of the episode, so we're backtracking about an hour here. Where are you two calling in from?
Salem, Oregon today.
Yeah, I am in Rockville, Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C.
Wow. This whole time I assumed both of you were in Ohio. And then you started talking about how you weren't in Ohio, and it made me wonder, well, then where are they?
I wish that my dorm was painted and decorated like this, but it will not be.
Oh, okay. So our next project, everyone, we're starting a GoFundMe so we can buy that color of wallpaper. I think wallpaper is easier to go up in dorm rooms. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to pimp out Cass's future dorm room, wherever that may be in the world. Okay. Well, that is your takeaway from this episode, ladies and gentlemen. In all seriousness, thank you both for being on the show and reminding everybody to be kind to your technicians at any capacity all the time. And this virtual thing is like hard. I know people like Women's Theater Festival and Play on Shakespeare. They're making virtual theater look easy because they're just like, oh yeah, 40 plays in 3 days. We got this. No, it's really hard. And thank you both, Sophia and Cass, for kind of diving into some of the ways and some of the obstacles that you're facing in this work. I want to say to our audience, thanks for hanging in there with us. I did scroll through the chat. Apparently, decisions were made about Cats the Musical. I'm like, yeah, decisions were made. Yep. So thank you all for hanging in there with us and having a good time. We do have merch on Teespring. We do have a blog and other exclusive content on Ko-fi. You can support us. The link is like literally right here. If I think my fingers are pointing in the right direction. Who knows? But that is at Not Dead with Keyanna. We have the Instagram and we have a Facebook page and we have a Twitter. I'll be honest. Twitter's hard for me. So Instagram and Facebook is where you'll find Keyanna most active. Thank you all so much. This has been Keyanna Alexander with Cassandra. I keep calling you Cass. With Cassandra and with Sophia, reminding everybody, hey friends, theater ain't dead. We'll see you next time.